For 67 years, Cuba has been ruled without elections by a family and a party the Cuban people never chose. Fidel and Raúl Castro did not win power at the ballot box. They gained it through bombs, ambushes, assassinations, and lies. When Batista announced elections, Castro refused to participate because he knew he would lose. The only crime Batista had committed in Castro's eyes was depriving him of the presidency he thought he was owed. From the very beginning, the United States knew this. From Bogotá in 1948, where Fidel agitated with Marxists during the Bogotazo, to the Moncada attack of 1953, to the Granma landing in 1956, U.S. intelligence had the evidence. Raúl Castro and Che Guevara were openly Marxist. The 26th of July movement was infiltrated by communists, and their tactics were terroristic. Roy Rubottom, the Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs, had those reports on his desk. Yet instead of warning Congress and the public, he presented Castro as a nationalist agrarian reformer, while hammering Batista as brutal and corrupt. At the same time, Herbert Matthews, a New York Times correspondent and lifelong sympathizer of communist forces since the Spanish Civil War, where he romanticized brigades that executed priests and nuns, was ushered into the Sierra Maestra to write glowing front-page profiles of Fidel. Matthews' articles made Castro a household name in the United States and gave him instant international legitimacy, just as Rubottom was lobbying to cut Batista off from U.S. weapons. Within days of Castro's entry into Havana in January 1959, while executions were already underway, the U.S. recognized his government. What followed was not reform, but destruction. Fidel Castro immediately legalized executions, built a vast prison system, and created forced labor camps for believers, homosexuals, and dissidents. Over 1 million Cubans fled their homes, thousands drowned at sea, thousands more were shot. A country richer per capita than much of Europe, where more Americans lived than Cubans in the United States, was reduced to ration cards, blackouts, and despair. 5 centuries of civil society, free press, independent unions, and cultural life were annihilated. No Cubans had ever drowned trying to reach the United States under previous governments. Under Castro, it became a grim symbol of life under communism. And the killing did not stop at Cuba's borders. Throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, Havana trained and armed guerrillas who murdered civilians, police, teachers, and clergy from Venezuela to El Salvador. In Africa, more than 300,000 Cuban troops and advisors fought alongside regimes that carried out massacres in Angola and Ethiopia. Cuban intelligence trained and sheltered Middle Eastern terrorists who hijacked airliners and killed innocents. Conservative estimates of the direct deaths linked to Castro's exported revolution run into the tens of thousands. Including wars he helped prolong, well over 100,000 people died. Even the murder of unarmed Cuban-American pilots of Brothers to the Rescue in 1996, shot down in international airspace, was met by paralysis. NORAD and U.S. authorities were listening in real time. No jets were scrambled. Congress passed the Helms-Burton Act, but its punishments amounted to nothing. The regime kept its grip. Cubans and the widows and children of the dead were fed smoke screens while the butcher was portrayed as a hero. Through all of this, the same fraudulent narrative was maintained. Bohemia magazine's fabricated figure of 20,000 dead under Batista, confessed by its editor Miguel Angel Quevedo before his suicide, became gospel in classrooms. Hollywood romanticized Che while erasing his role as executioner. University programs parroted Havana's statistics, portraying literacy campaigns while ignoring firing squads. Organizations of people who have never uttered a word of Spanish and have no relatives shot in the head exist simply to sell this version of history to students. Only academics from the former Warsaw Pact, who lived through Marxism themselves, reject the charade. The hypocrisy is staggering. Batista, who at least allowed elections and spared Fidel and Raúl when he could have executed them, is branded the butcher. Castro, who created a one-party state, sank tugboats full of children, shot down unarmed pilots, exported bloodshed abroad, and kept Cubans in poverty and fear, is celebrated as a reformer. Even now, films like Wasp Network repeat the regime's narrative while ignoring its crimes. And the same unelected apparatus still rules Cuba in 2025 under Miguel Díaz-Canel, chosen not by the people, but by Raúl Castro as his successor. The result is the most glaring, willful, fraudulent conspiracy in modern American history. A conspiracy of State Department officials who had the intelligence and concealed it, of journalists who romanticized murderers of Catholics and nuns, of academics who continue to launder a dictatorship's image, of policies that drain opposition and send remittances while pretending to pressure the regime. It is a fraud that has cost over 200,000 lives worldwide, destroyed a nation's prosperity, scattered its people, and buried the truth under slogans about liberation. No one excuses Hitler by pointing to the Kaiser. No one should excuse Fidel Castro by pointing to Batista. Yet in 2025, the lies still circulate, the regime still stands, and the victims still wait for history's verdict. The hard question is not, what went wrong in Cuba, but why do we keep covering for it? If you have found value in our effort to expose this grotesque and deliberate conspiracy, a conspiracy that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives, destroyed a nation, and buried the truth for generations, then do not let it remain hidden any longer. Please like this video, hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with as many people as possible. It is high time, in 2025, that this message of truth finally reaches the world, and that we demand an explanation for how this was engineered and why so many men, women, and children had to die.